Tidelands. The first time I met Mackenzie, I was hanging from cables 140 feet above the Charleston harbor, conducting structural integrity tests on a 200-year-old lighthouse when the wind shifted and he emerged from the access tunnel below, like some sort of atmospheric prophet, carrying a handwritten warning that said, in his brutal Scottish accent, "Category 4's coming in hot, and your lighthouse is about to tell us exactly what it thinks of modern architecture." My name is Kenji Okafor. I'm 31, a coastal erosion scientist for the Charleston National Heritage Project, which sounds administrative but is actually just me spending my days measuring how many inches the Atlantic Ocean is stealing from South Carolina, centimeter by centimeter. The water wins, and we're losing this fight. I was supposed to finish testing by 1600 hours, rappel down, head home, finish my research proposal. Instead, I found myself looking at this guy, maybe 29, with copper-red hair matted with humidity, blue-gray eyes that looked like they'd seen every storm that ever existed, and a body that suggested he'd spent his entire life climbing things humans probably shouldn't climb. "You're Mackenzie," I said, not a question. I'd read the Heritage Commission briefing. Lighthouse keeper, 8th-generation Scottish-American, lived on site because apparently in 2024 they still maintained a full-time keeper for a structure that had survived everything from Sherman's March to Category 5 hurricanes. "And you're the scientist testing how fast my lighthouse is falling into the ocean," he replied, not unkindly. Spoiler alert, it's not falling because of water erosion. It's falling because we stopped maintaining it the way my great-grandfather maintained it. But sure, measure away. There was challenge in that statement, not hostility, something else. Something that felt like a person who'd spent too long watching people give up on old things. "I'm not here to prove it's falling," I said, securing my test equipment. "I'm here to determine rate of deterioration so the city knows what timeline they have to actually do something about it. But your tone suggests you think doing something about it is impossible." "Not impossible." He was climbing toward me now, moving with the kind of comfort at height that made my chest tight. "Just unlikely. Places like this, they're not profitable. They're not Instagram-worthy. They're not worth the grant money. So they crumble, and people like you measure the crumble, and people like me watch it happen, and everyone feels sad about it at the Historical Society meetings." He reached my platform, and I noticed several things simultaneously. He smelled like salt water and determination. His hands were calloused in ways that suggested non-romantic climbing, and his eyes were the exact shade of gray-blue that the ocean gets right before a storm. "How long have you been keeper here?" I asked, not because I didn't know the answer. 2 years, transferred from Maine, but because I wanted to hear him talk about it. "Long enough to know every structural weakness of this lighthouse," he said, sitting down on the platform like we were at a cafe instead of 140 feet above crashing water. "Long enough to know which stairs creak and which weather patterns. Long enough to know that this lighthouse is dying, and everyone knows it, and nobody knows what to do about it." "I do," I said quietly. He looked at me, really looked at me, and something shifted. "What?" "I know what to do about it." I pulled out my tablet, showed him the structural data I'd been collecting. Not for the Heritage Commission, for myself. Private research on how to stabilize 200-year-old structures against coastal erosion using modern materials that don't destroy the aesthetic integrity. Your lighthouse doesn't have to fall. It would just require someone who cares enough to figure out how. He studied the data, and I watched his face transform. From cynical to hopeful to something I couldn't quite name. "This is your work?" he asked. "Personal project. Unfunded, unpublished, probably not viable." I shrugged. "But if you're right that everyone's given up, maybe the only way forward is someone doing it anyway." "You're either brilliant or insane," Liam said. Can I be both? He smiled, and it was like watching clouds clear. In my experience, anyone trying to save old things is always both. We came down from the lighthouse around 1700 hours, right as the sky started doing that particular color shift that means atmospheric upheaval. The National Weather Service had been warning about a storm system for days, something that had been downgraded and upgraded approximately 16 times, so nobody was taking it seriously. Liam was taking it seriously. "Come inside," he said, leading me to the keeper's house, a small Victorian cottage attached to the lighthouse base. The automated systems can handle standard weather, but if this thing becomes what the latest models suggest, Category 4, I finished. Category 4, he confirmed. Then I need to be here, and you need to not be out on the water, and we need to talk about what happens next. The keeper's house was exactly what I expected. Immaculate, organized with the precision of someone who took maintenance seriously, filled with historical documents about the lighthouse dating back to 1823. But it was also lived in. Photos on the mantel, a coffee cup on the kitchen table, a worn copy of Scottish maritime history on the chair by the window. "You love this place," I said, not a question. "It's not the place," Liam said, making tea with the kind of ritual that suggested he did this often, probably alone. "It's what it represents. Continuity. People before us maintained this. We maintain it. People after us maintain it. That chain matters, but the city's ready to let it break, not if we don't let them." He handed me tea, and our fingers touched briefly. "You're very confident about that." "I'm very confident that there's usually a way forward if someone's willing to fight for it." I accepted the mug. "The question is whether you're willing to fight." "I've been fighting for 2 years," he said. "Alone." "You're not alone anymore," I said, and meant it in a way that felt larger than just lighthouse preservation. The storm warnings escalated around 2100 hours. National Weather Service issued a coastal flood advisory. Local news reported that the storm was intensifying faster than predicted. Storm surge projections rose from 12 feet to 16 feet to 18 feet in the span of 2 hours. "This is bad," Liam said, checking the automated equipment. "Worse than bad. The kind of storm that decides whether old structures survive or become rubble." "How bad?" I asked. "The kind where we shut the tourist access, secure all exterior equipment, and wait to see if 200 years of history survives the night." He paused, looking at me. "You should leave. Head inland. There's no reason for you to be here." "There's every reason," I said. "This lighthouse is my research. These structural tests matter." And I stopped, unsure how to say what I meant. "I don't want to be somewhere else while you're here alone." He looked at me for a long moment. "That's not a practical consideration." "No," I agreed. "It's not. But I'm not leaving." We spent the next 6 hours preparing, securing loose equipment, checking backup systems, running through emergency protocols that Liam had clearly memorized. He moved through the lighthouse with absolute confidence, and I realized that this building wasn't just his job, it was his calling. His great-grandfather had maintained this. His grandfather, his father, and now him, against all odds, against all practical economic sense. Around 100 hours, the power went out. Not an unexpected event given the storm. The automated systems kicked in. Backup generators hummed to life. Emergency lighting took over. But it happened anyway, and suddenly we were in a lighthouse during a Category 4 hurricane, with wind that sounded like the ocean itself was trying to break through the walls. "The light's still running?" I asked, looking up at the beacon that continued rotating above us. "Backup system," Liam confirmed. "One of the things that actually works about this old place. The designers built redundancy into everything. If one system failed, 2 others would compensate." Modern design doesn't do that. It's all efficiency, no redundancy. But these old things, he gestured around the lighthouse, they were designed to survive exactly what's happening right now. Then we're safe, I said. From the lighthouse, yes. From the storm surge, we'll find out in about 4 hours. We went to his quarters, a small apartment in the keeper's house that had been retrofitted for modern living while maintaining historical accuracy. He made more tea. I opened my laptop and started running erosion models, not to distract myself from fear, but because I care about things the way he cares about things. Tell me about your family, I said around 0200, needing conversation the way I needed air. He was quiet for a moment. My father was supposed to take over the lighthouse. His father did. Great-grandfather did. But my dad wanted something different. Wanted to leave Scotland. Wanted to build something new instead of maintaining something old. Left when he was 22. Never looked back. Is he still alive? Yes. In Edinburgh now. Rebuilds classic cars, apparently. Very successful. Very happy. Liam paused. I'm the son he never wanted. The one who came back to do the thing he ran away from. Does he know? He knows I'm a lighthouse keeper. He doesn't know that I didn't choose it, that I inherited the genes for maintenance, for caring about old things, for believing that continuity matters, that I can't walk away from something just because it's difficult. I reached over, took his hand. You didn't inherit it. You chose it. Every single day you choose it. His fingers closed around mine. You don't even know me, Kenji. We met today. I know you climb 140 feet above the ocean to check on a lighthouse that nobody else cares about. I know you've been fighting alone to save it. I know that when you realized someone was trying to help, you didn't push them away. I squeezed his hand. That tells me everything I need to know. This is insane, he whispered. Absolutely insane, I agreed. The hurricane will pass. And if it doesn't, if the worst happens, I'd rather be here with you than anywhere else. He kissed me then, there in his lighthouse keeper's apartment, while the storm raged outside and the beacon rotated above us. It was careful and desperate and terrified all at once. His hand came up to my face, and I felt him shaking slightly, not from cold but from the intensity of everything happening. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. If we survive this, he said, can I take you to dinner? We're going to survive this, I said, and yes, absolutely yes. The storm surge came at 0430 hours. It wasn't like a wave. It was like the ocean decided to relocate inland, rising and rising and rising, water pouring around the lighthouse base with a sound like the world breaking. I watched from the upper windows as the ground floor flooded, as equipment was swept away, as everything the human world had built down there was suddenly the ocean's property again. How high? I asked, voice steadier than I felt. 18 feet, Liam said, checking instruments. Maybe 19. The models were right. This is the worst storm surge I've ever seen. The lighthouse, built on bedrock, 200 years of storms, and it's still here. He put his arm around me. We're not losing it tonight. But as the night wore on, and the water kept rising, and the wind kept screaming, I started thinking about all the lighthouses that hadn't survived, all the historical structures that the ocean had claimed, all the things humans built that the world decided to take back. Around 0600, things started to shift. Not get better, shift. The wind stopped escalating. The rain lightened slightly. The pressure in the air began to change. That specific relief that comes when a storm moves past instead of stalling directly over you. It's moving, Liam said, checking weather updates. Storm's tracking north. We're in the clear. I wanted to celebrate, but I was watching the water, still rising. Still angry, still claiming everything it could reach. The structural integrity? I asked. Liam checked the sensors. Perfect. Not a single alarm. This lighthouse is doing exactly what it was designed to do: survive. By 0900 hours, the water started to recede. By noon, the wind had dropped to manageable levels. By 1400 hours, we could step outside and see the damage: flooded streets, uprooted trees, debris everywhere, boats overturned, infrastructure destroyed. The lighthouse still stood. We have to document this, I said immediately. This needs to be structural proof that these old techniques work, that maintaining historical buildings with traditional methods actually creates resilience. Liam finished. Yeah, I know. You've only mentioned it about 50 times. Because it's important. I grabbed his arm. This is real data, Liam. This is proof that your lighthouse, that all these old structures, they're not dying relics. They're actually better at surviving than modern buildings. We can use this for funding, for a preservation initiative that actually... He kissed me to shut me up. Right there in the hurricane aftermath, with water still draining from the streets and the smell of salt and destruction everywhere, he kissed me like I was the most important thing in the world. I love that you're already thinking about how to save other lighthouses, he said when he pulled back. I love that you're this brilliant about structural science and terrible at shutting up about it. I love that you came here today. Love, I repeated. Is it too fast? Probably, but I've known some version of you my entire life. People who care about things that don't matter economically, who fight for survival of the things that matter historically. I just didn't know your name until today. My name is Kenji Okafor, I said. I'm a coastal erosion scientist. I think your lighthouse is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and I love you too. The next 2 weeks were a blur of assessment, documentation, and damage reports. The lighthouse had survived with minimal damage. The keeper's house had flooded but was salvageable. The surrounding area was devastated, boats destroyed, structures damaged, lives disrupted. But the lighthouse stood. Liam and I spent those 2 weeks photographing every intact structure, documenting how older construction techniques had weathered the storm better than modern reinforcement. We interviewed structural engineers. We collected data. We started writing a paper. By week 3, we had something remarkable, proof that historical preservation techniques actually created structural resilience, that maintaining buildings the way they'd been built 200 years ago made them more capable of surviving modern disasters than retrofitting them with modern materials. The Heritage Commission was interested. Suddenly, a lighthouse that everyone had written off as dying wasn't dying anymore. It was becoming a case study. You did this, Liam said one morning about a month after the storm. We were sitting on the lighthouse gallery, looking out at the harbor that was slowly rebuilding. You turned disaster into opportunity. We did this, I corrected. You maintained it. I documented it. Together we proved it mattered. I'm quitting my job, he said suddenly. I turned to look at him. What? My job at the Heritage Commission. I'm quitting. He was looking out at the harbor, not at me. And I'm starting a non-profit, Historical Resilience Initiative. The point is to research and document how older structures actually survive modern disasters better than new ones, how maintenance and continuity create resilience, how the things we're trying to throw away are actually the things that save us. That's, I started. Insane? He offered. Impractical? Economically unfeasible? I was going to say beautiful, I said. That's beautiful. He finally looked at me. I want you to be the lead research scientist. I have a job. You have a job that funds your private research, Liam said. What if you had a job that was your research? What if we could actually do this full time? What if we could save other lighthouses, other buildings? What if we could prove over and over again that continuity and maintenance and care create resilience. I thought about my coastal erosion work, important but depressing, measuring loss, documenting decline. I thought about Liam's lighthouse work, maintaining something beautiful against all odds. "I'll do it," I said. "Yeah, but I need you to do something for me. Anything." "Are you seeing anyone?" I asked, smiling because I knew the answer. He laughed, pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Not officially, but I'm hoping to change that." The ring was white gold with a lighthouse etched into the band. Simple, historical, beautiful. "Yes," I said. "Obviously yes." Epilogue, 1 year later. The Historical Resilience Initiative had documented 6 lighthouse structures and 12 historical buildings. Every single one had weathered the previous year's hurricane season better than modern structures built alongside them. The data was remarkable. The implications were transformative. We were standing in the Tidelands Preservation Center, a new building attached to Liam's lighthouse, designed to house our research, giving a presentation to the National Heritage Foundation about scaling the initiative nationwide. "What you're seeing here," I said, gesturing to the structural analysis on the screen, "is proof that historical preservation isn't nostalgic. It's practical, it's survival." These buildings were designed with redundancy, with maintenance protocols, with continuity in mind. And in a climate crisis, that's exactly what we need. The room was full of preservation specialists, city planners, structural engineers, and in the front row, Liam was watching me with pride on his face. After the presentation, during the cocktail reception, he pulled me aside. "You were brilliant," he said, kissing my forehead. "We were brilliant," I corrected. "None of this works without you." "That's what I love about us," he said. "You measured the decline, I maintain the structure. Together we prove that things don't have to disappear." That's very poetic. I'm Scottish. We're inherently poetic. He handed me a glass of champagne. "And I have news. The city wants to expand your lighthouse stabilization technique to 32 historical structures across South Carolina. Federal grant funding, 5-year project." I nearly dropped the champagne. "They approved it. They approved it. Which means, if you want, we could actually hire a team, make this a real organization, expand beyond lighthouses to all the old buildings that everyone's given up on." I looked around the preservation center, the building we'd designed together, that held 6 months of our research, that proved that maintenance and care created resilience in structures and people alike. "Let's save everything," I said. Liam smiled. "I'm counting on it."